Remember when every pub in Britain had that unmistakable haze hanging in the air? A thick cloud of smoke floating above the bar, wrapping itself around the chandeliers, dim lights, and every wooden table where old friends gathered. You'd walk in, and before you even heard the laughter or the sound of a pint glass being set down, you smelled the smoke. Cigarettes weren't just cigarettes back then. They were part of the background of daily life, stitched into the nation's fabric, part of the soundtrack of Britain itself. Your granddad could tell a person's story by what they smoked. He'd look across the room and know, that bloke's a Capstan man. That lad's got a number 6 between his lips. That gent with the tweed jacket? He's probably a Camel man. It wasn't just about the nicotine hit. It was about class, culture, identity. There was a time in Britain when smoking wasn't an afterthought, it was a lifestyle. Today, we're taking a slow, long puff from the past to explore the cigarette brands that define generations. Cigarettes that were more than just tobacco wrapped in paper, they were a badge of who you were. Whether you sneaked one behind the bike sheds at school, nicked one from your uncle's packet when he wasn't looking, or just remember the lingering smell on your coat after a ride on the bus, you're about to take a trip down memory lane. So, let's light up the memories. Players number 6. If you grew up in the 1960s and 70s, you'll remember this one. Launched in 1965, Players number 6 was the working man's smoke. Affordable, recognizable, and everywhere. The packet, simple blue and white, was a symbol in itself. It wasn't glamorous, but it was reliable. A filtered alternative to the pricier Players Navy cut, number 6 quickly became a go-to choice for young adults and working-class Brits. It was strong, full-bodied, not too smooth but not harsh enough to scare away beginners. For factory workers, lorry drivers, and teenagers sneaking their first puff behind the school bike sheds, number 6 was the cigarette of choice. Price made it even more appealing. In the early 70s, you could grab a pack of 20 for just over 20p. It was pocket money smoking, accessible to nearly everyone. But times changed. In 1978, when tobacco taxation shifted to being based on retail price rather than weight, the gap between budget smokes like number 6 and premium brands like Benson and Hedges began to close. Suddenly, spending just a few pennies more gave you a more luxurious cigarette. Overnight, the appeal of number 6 began to fade. By the 1980s, with status becoming more important, many smokers abandoned it for higher-end brands. And quietly, by 1993, number 6 disappeared altogether. But for those who lived through its peak, it will always be remembered as the honest, no-nonsense smoke of Britain's working class. Camel. Now, when you think of Camel cigarettes, you probably think America. Desert sands, jazz clubs, and a kind of exotic coolness. But in Britain, especially in the 60s through to the 80s, Camel carved out a cult following. Imported, pricier, and harder to find outside big cities, Camel was never a brand for the masses. But for artists, intellectuals, jazz lovers, and those who wanted to feel just a bit different, it was perfect. The pack itself stood out, a Camel against the pyramids, mysterious and foreign compared to the everyday packets of Woodbine or number 6. Unfiltered and smooth, Camel offered something different. In London, Brighton, Edinburgh, places buzzing with culture and rebellion, Camels found their way into the hands of those who wanted to set themselves apart. But being imported meant they were expensive, and that price kept them niche. By the 80s, Camel tried pushing filtered versions into the UK market, but it never quite took off like domestic brands. Today, Camel still exists globally, but for Brits, it's a memory of a smoke that once meant sophistication and individuality. Capstan. This wasn't just a cigarette. This was a challenge. Full strength, unfiltered, rough, and powerful. A Capstan cigarette was as strong as a miner's handshake. If you lit one, you knew you weren't messing about. Popular during and after World War II, Capstan was the choice of dock workers, sailors, and those who wanted a smoke that packed a punch. These weren't casual cigarettes. They were short, stubby, and loaded with tar and nicotine. One puff, and you felt it in your chest. For decades, Capstan was everywhere in working-class communities, especially in port cities like Liverpool, Glasgow, and Bristol. A pack might set you back around 40p in the 1970s, but what you were really buying was strength. In fact, Capstan had the highest nicotine levels of all British cigarettes, and nearly the highest tar content as well. When health warnings began to dominate in the 1970s and filtered cigarettes gained popularity, Capstan started to fade. But ask anyone who smoked them in their prime, and they'll tell you, nothing came close. Capstan separated the men from the boys. Embassy. If Capstan was grit, Embassy was Polish. Launched in the 1910s by Imperial Tobacco, Embassy became a household name, reaching its peak in the 1960s when it was Britain's top-selling cigarette. By 1968, Embassy commanded nearly a quarter of the UK cigarette market. Its slogan, "Inhale to your heart's content," summed up the era's attitude before health warnings became commonplace. The packaging had an elegance to it, and Embassy Gold became the premium option for those who wanted something a little classier. But Embassy wasn't just about the smoke, it was a lifestyle. With its famous loyalty scheme, you could collect Embassy coupons and trade them for household goods. Kettles, toasters, even bicycles, all from smoking. For many, that red and gold pack was more than just a cigarette, it was a ticket to consumer rewards. By the 1980s, however, changing tastes and health campaigns chipped away at its dominance. Embassy still exists in some form today, but its golden era is long gone. For those who remember trading in coupons or lighting up after a Sunday roast, Embassy remains unforgettable. Woodbine. Now here's a legend. Launched in 1888, Woodbine quickly became the people's smoke. Cheap, strong, and always available, it was the cigarette of soldiers in both world wars. If there was a pack in a soldier's breast pocket, it was likely a Woodbine. Known as the poor man's cigarette, unfiltered and harsh, it delivered an intense nicotine hit in just a few drags. Its flavor was raw, smoky, and unforgiving. Not for casual puffers. Woodbines left their mark not just on your lungs but on your fingers, your clothes, and your very identity. In the 1940s through the 1960s, they were everywhere. A pack of 10 for less than a shilling. Crushed packets in jacket pockets, stubbed out butts on the pavement outside pubs. Woodbine was the symbol of the working class man. Filtered versions came later, but by 1988, Woodbine as people remembered it was discontinued. Today, the brand still exists in a different form, but ask an old Brit about Woodbine and you'll see their eyes light up with memory. Consulate. Cool as a mountain stream. That was the slogan, and it stuck. While most cigarette brands in mid-century Britain were about grit, strength, and tradition, Consulate brought freshness. A menthol cigarette with a light minty taste, Consulate became hugely popular in the 60s and 70s, particularly among women and younger smokers who found harsher cigarettes unappealing. The packaging, white and green, looked clean and modern. Compared to the earthy and industrial designs of brands like Capstan or Woodbine, Consulate stood out as sophisticated and fashionable. Menthol was still a novelty then, and Consulate capitalized on it, marketing itself as smoother and somehow less harmful. Priced in the middle, it wasn't as cheap as No. 6, but it wasn't as expensive as Dunhill either. In the mid-70s, a pack might cost you around 35 to 40p. But menthol's charm didn't last forever. By the late 80s, the craze had faded, and in 2020, menthol cigarettes were banned altogether in the UK. Today, Consulate is gone, but its slogan lives on in memory, cool as a mountain stream. Craven A, introduced in 1921 and named after the Earl of Craven, Craven A built its reputation on smoothness. Its ads proudly declared, "Will not affect your throat." Ironic today, but it worked. Popular across southern England, Craven A appealed to those who wanted a less harsh smoke. The red, white, and black packaging was bold and instantly recognizable. For decades, it was a favorite for smokers who wanted refinement without the rasp. By the late 80s, though, the brand faded in the UK. Today, Craven A can still be found in niche markets abroad, but its golden days in Britain are long gone. Still, the name alone sparks memories of a smoother era of smoking. Senior service. Even the name sounded official. Launched in 1925, Senior Service leaned heavily on naval tradition. The branding anchors, flags, and the proud nickname of the Royal Navy itself gave it a masculine, patriotic edge. Known for being unfiltered and strong, Senior Service was a premium cigarette of its time. A pack in the 1970s might cost around 50p, a bit pricier than budget brands, but it promised a bold, full-bodied smoke. Its flavor was powerful, its reputation even more so. While not as throat-ripping as Capstan, it wasn't far off. Smokers who chose Senior Service wanted strength and tradition. By the 2000s, though, the brand was discontinued, a relic of a different era. But for those who remember it, Senior Service was a badge of pride. Strand. Strand. Perhaps the most famous failure in British cigarette history. Launched in 1959, Strand was meant to be sophisticated, urban, and cool. Its iconic advert showed a man in a suit walking through empty London streets under moody jazz music, with the slogan, "You're never alone with a strand." But instead of seeing sophistication, the public saw loneliness. The man looked isolated, sad, and unlucky. The slogan, rather than reassuring, came off as depressing. And just like that, the brand flopped. Sales were abysmal. Only a tiny fraction of smokers ever bought a pack. The irony is, Strand cigarettes weren't bad. Medium strength, smooth, with stylish blue and white packaging. But that one failed campaign doomed them. Within 2 years, they were pulled from shelves. The advert became a case study in marketing disasters, and the phrase "you're never alone with a strand" turned into a cultural joke. Still, for those who saw those ads, it remains unforgettable. And finally, Rothmans King Size. One of the few brands that managed to balance style and substance. From the 60s to the 80s, Rothmans was associated with sport, class, and aspiration. Its crisp blue and white packs exuded quiet confidence. Priced slightly higher than budget brands, a pack of 20 in the late 70s might cost around 40p. But for that price, you got a well-blended, slightly sweet, strong cigarette. Rothmans sponsored sports, appeared in adverts, and gave smokers the sense that they were part of something refined yet still accessible. Today, Rothmans still exists, but the modern version bears little resemblance to the original king-size formula. Ask those who smoked the original, and they'll tell you, it was the perfect balance of taste, strength, and sophistication. And that brings us to the end of our journey. Cigarettes today are a shadow of what they once were in British culture, and for good reason. Health awareness, bans, and societal change have moved us away from those smoky days. But for anyone who lived through it, these brands weren't just tobacco. They were part of life. They were the smell of the pub, the sight of your dad lighting one after work, the feel of a pack in your jacket pocket. If you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane, give the video a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more nostalgia. Until next time, keep those memories burning bright.